Hello, my name is Colin, and this is my documentary on poverty in the city of Boston. Imagine you are one of the unluckiest groups of people in the world, the people affected by poverty, and live in one of the busiest cities in the world, the city of Boston. The city of Boston is one of the most expensive places to live across the nation. You have a hard time accessing food, water, basic living necessities, and you are just barely keeping up with monthly payments. If you live on the street, people pass you by and don't think to help you in any way. How long do you think you could manage living in the city of Boston in these conditions? The Merriam-Webster defines poverty as a state of one who lacks the usual or socially acceptable amount of money or material possessions. There are a lot of people affected by poverty in Boston, and much more around the world. It grows more and more each year because of the high demand that is required to live comfortably in Boston. Over the last several years, poverty has become a much larger problem as the years go by. Lots of problems lead to this: rising taxes, job cutbacks, personal problems like addiction to drugs or gambling, debt, and many more. The state of Massachusetts has a poverty rate a little less than half of the states in the United States. Massachusetts ranks 24th out of the 50 states by poverty percentage. That is a crazy fact. The city of Boston is very divided by income inequality. On one side, there are those who have enough or more than enough money to live comfortably in Boston. On the other side, there are those who have a hard time earning enough money to live comfortably in Boston. You will see this later on in this documentary, a visual of the income inequality in Boston. The rising tax and rent in Boston is the main problem for those affected by poverty. They would need to find new jobs in order to meet the cost of the taxes and the rent of an apartment or mortgage of a house. Multiple people affected by poverty have to work multiple hours to keep up with payments to feed their families if they have them. The government often provides government welfare programs, which gives temporary assistance to those in need. But the interview you are about to see, you will hear about a woman disliking the government welfare programs and how she is helping another local program.
It's the start of a new day in Boston, but Isabel Torres is already on her way to a second job after working the night shift at a local hospital. It's a grueling schedule for a single mother of three, but Isabel says working long hours is better than when she depended entirely on government welfare programs.
I felt hopeless. I felt like I had no voice. Like I would speak up, I would say what I have to say, ask for the help, and tell them what my situation was. But it's just like they just wouldn't listen. It was just like another case, another file.
And then she joined the Family Independence Initiative. This is a privately funded approach to tackling poverty, and its premise is simple. Small groups of people who face similar challenges gather and work together. And so far the results are very encouraging.
And we named our group Butterfly Journey because we all are on a journey.
The program's organisers don't set an agenda here, nor do they tell anyone what to do. Instead, people are encouraged to learn new skills, find their own solutions, and keep track of their progress. The program's director says it's a partnership that has led to real and lasting change.
They've been able to increase their incomes by 25% in 2 years, their savings by 264%. They've also increased their kids' grades, reduced debt, as well as taken part in hundreds of different activities to move closer to their goals.
For Isabel, the chance to meet other single mothers has given her the support and inspiration she needed.
I have more people in my corner than I ever did before. When I wasn't doing anything, and they'd say, hey, go for it, do it. You've come such a long way.
She's now training to be a guidance counsellor. Proof, say those behind the programme, that people want a hand up and not a handout. Andy Gallagher, Al Jazeera, Boston, Massachusetts.
Before I say anything else, I want to talk about COVID-19. Since March of 2020, the world has been in a pandemic. The already bad poverty rates across America, and specifically in Boston, have increased due to this. The percentage of poverty in Massachusetts rose during the pandemic by almost 2 percentage points. Poverty rose 1.4 percentage points from 9.4% in the period from April to June to 10.8% for August and September. As we all know, there was an election back in November, and we now have President Joe Biden in office. Joe Biden has recently proposed a child tax credit which begins in July of 2024, which would give $3,000 per child at the ages of 7 to 17 years old to parents with children. The parents would also get an additional $3,500 for children $600. This will give a chance for parents with kids to get out of poverty. This will be going out to 78% of parents across Massachusetts on behalf of 1 million children. This is an attempt to cut poverty in half because of President Biden. He's trying to beat the pandemic surge of poverty. Males and females the ages of 6 to 17 in Boston are the group of people who are affected by poverty the most. They have a combined percentage of poverty just below 50%. This child tax credit will help aid those kids in poverty and in Boston overall. There was a significant way to prevent or decrease the percentage of poverty. This child tax credit is going to be that way. We need to find more ways that we could help lower the poverty rate in Boston and in America as a whole. As you can see in these pictures, this is what living in poverty looks like. As you can see, it's not fun, it's not like appealing. Can you imagine living like this for the rest of your life? In this picture, you can see the available houses in Beacon Hill. And as you can see, they are not cheap. Beacon Hill is a very expensive place to live in Boston. If you were to average the cost of the available houses, it would come out to $1,133,625. That is not cheap. The people in poverty wouldn't be able to live a life like this, as most of the people in poverty make $30,000 or less a year. Therefore, you see the areas of poverty in Boston are located just outside of the city. You'll see this demonstrated in the next clip with a graph showing the different areas of poverty and how they relate to wealthy areas of Boston.
The divisions between rich and poor in America, nearly side by side in two neighborhoods in Boston. On a tree-lined street, homes for those with access to wealth. Nearby, rundown public housing units for those without. But now the area is changing as developers tear down the old and replace it with luxury apartments to cater to more rich buyers moving in.
And with the development is displacement. So all these families that live here and work here are being displaced because they can no longer afford the rent.
Like Rita Alcaraz, an immigrant from Mexico who is being pushed out by a landlord who has doubled her rent to nearly $2,000 a month.
Porque sentimos coraje.
We are trying to be strong, but also we are upset because we don't have the money to pay.
The reality Rita and people like her live with every day, now part of new data mapping that shows the economic divide and how close together rich and poor live.
Let's look at this neighborhood, this dark blue neighborhood.
Analytics company Esri created a neighborhood-by-neighborhood breakdown of what it calls the wealth divide in America. This is Washington, D.C. The darker the blue, the wealthier the area. The darker the orange, the deeper the poverty. And this is what the mapping showed in the area of Boston where Rita lives. This neighborhood is called Jamaica Plain, where the average household income is $169,000 a year, more than 3 times the national average, making this neighborhood one of the more affluent in all of Boston. But just a few blocks away, here in the Forest Hills neighborhood, the story is much different. Here, the household median income is only $34,000 a year. The hope is these maps prod people to think about inequality on a deeper level and maybe bring about change.
Is the American dream viable? It sure should be. It must be. And how can we make sure that it is viable? Not just for those of us who are privileged and wealthy, but that those opportunities are open to everybody.
A new way to identify the economic gaps in society. The harder part is how to close them. Gabriel Elizondo, Al Jazeera, Boston.